Have you ever thought to yourself that what got you here won't get you there? I think there are particular moments in our lives when we realize that we're being called to expand, but we're not quite sure how to do that. So if that's an experience that you've ever had, you might like to watch this podcast. Hi, so I'm Kate. I'm a transformational leadership coach. I run a company called The Team Coach. And I recently started doing deep dive one-to-one strategy transformational retreats. And I have Abbie Ryan here with me. She's one of the first people to go through these retreats. So I'm really delighted that you've generously agreed to come and chat with me about the experience of the retreat to bring this alive for other people who might want to think about whether this kind of retreat is right for them. So,
Of course. Good morning,
thank
Kate.
you.
How are you?
Yes, good. So Abbie, tell us a little bit about what was going on for you in your life and your business that led you to think about coming to do a transformational retreat with me.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the intentions for this year was to grow the businesses that I already had, grow the new businesses, and really underestimated the new challenges that come with growth. For me, the main intention was to understand this new mindset that I needed for going into these new businesses of mine and to become the person that I needed to be in order to run them well. What I was very aware of was that what got me to the person and the business owner that I was before the retreat wasn't going to suffice, and to see me through the new challenges, the new obstacles, and just to the day-to-day of running multiple businesses.
Mm.
Therefore, I came to you a little very overwhelmed, and I was just excited to be in your capable hands, and for you to, just to show me what I needed to do and who I needed to become in order to succeed at those.
Bless you. And I think, what you did brilliantly was recognize when you got to that point
Yeah.
that what got you here was not going to get you there.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm wondering what some of the challenges were that you came up against that made you realize that it was time to grow.
By trade, naturally, I'm a creative. And as we all know, that as creatives are great within our creativity, but then what comes with that creativity when it's successful is then onboarding more staff and more management and more communication. I knew that I needed to look into that because I was just very aware that it was a weakness of mine. In your sphere over the last few years, I knew that this was something that you exceeded at and did really well at, was communicating and holding these spaces for these big organizations and powerful leaders to come together and to communicate better. And that was something that I wanted for myself. So that's why I came to you.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for your faith. The faith that you
There's
put in me.
nobody else that I wanted to do this with. So that's why I reached out.
Bless you. So tell me about your expectations going into the retreat, and how did the retreat compare with those expectations that you might have had?
I know that you've run a number of retreats in the past, and I knew that I was in incredibly safe hands. And for me, I was excited for you to craft what you knew that I needed, because I knew that I needed assistance with many things, but what those things were, I was quite open and willing for you to do your thing with me, really. And I was excited for you to craft something personal and tailored, customized, expecting. I knew that there would be big changes. I was just very open to, okay, these are my challenges. It's over to you to
possibly the perfect client, actually. I know I've got a bunch of challenges. I don't know how to fix them.
Exactly.
Can you craft something that's really gonna take me through a process that's going to help me unpack this, get some clarity, because I've got to the point where I feel overwhelmed and I can't see the wood for the trees. And now I'm handing over, please craft me something. And, I suppose one of the things that we did before the retreat was understand where you were at. And that gave me a chance to be able to create a 2-day program that was going to take you through a bunch of processes and conversations to get you where you wanted to be. I mean, you had a sense of where you wanted to be, which was like, I need to upgrade.
I need to be here, but I know I'm here, and how I get there, well, that's obviously your expertise.
Exactly.
And then before the retreat, you sent over the itinerary, and what I liked is that it gave me an idea of what we were going to be doing, but yet still really left it up to my imagination. It didn't give a huge amount of detail until obviously we arrived, and then you give the full itinerary. And I quite liked that, because then going into it, it wasn't overwhelming. I could see hour by hour, and you're very detailed and very organized, which I love, and even breaks for lunch and for coffees and so forth.
The location, because actually I think
Yeah.
the location plays a big part in this retreat, which was Bab al Shams,
Mm,
the desert
mm,
resort.
mm.
And there's something that I love about that place, which is that it's outside of the city. It's in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
You can step out into the sand dunes. And
Mhm.
actually part of our process, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment, was going out into the dunes and sitting under the stars and having a chance to reflect, go,
Yeah.
get some calm, get some grounding, and go beyond, the day-to-day concerns that we get so kind of tunnel visioned on, don't we?
Yeah.
Get kind of into a loop with our stuff where we can't see beyond the day-to-day task. And
Mm,
actually part of the desert retreat experience is kind of being able to open up your perspective
mm.
to see and feel things from a
Yeah.
new perspective, but from a very grounded place.
What I loved about you crafting the retreat there is that, as you know, and I'd mentioned to you before the retreat, that I'm very much a fan of my morning rituals, therefore walking and a workout. And that's what I really loved that you brought into the retreat there in Bab al Shams, is that we went for that beautiful walk along the path in the dunes. And even just that intention setting in the morning on the second day, it couldn't have been in a better place. There's no construction, there's no cars, there's very little distraction there. So even just, setting the day in that way, in that location was, it was perfect.
There's something very nice about walking and talking. I think it
Yeah.
takes it takes us into a different place.
Really.
So tell me about a particular moment or something that you experienced during the retreat that was kind of a breakthrough for you.
Like I said, I had the overwhelm,
Mm.
and I honestly felt that I was on this uh, hamster wheel of getting through every day. And for you to almost kind of, it felt kind of that I was removed from that and held during the retreat. That was the biggest breakthrough, because then for me, I could see that we were going to craft some great things for me to be able to manage myself and my schedule moving forward. And for you to just totally put me at ease, that was the biggest breakthrough. Because leading up to the retreat, I'd reached out to some friends in business and was asking questions, and I kind of felt a little bit alone, thinking I don't know how to fix this level of madness.
But the thing in business is that lots of people will give you advice, but it's
Yes.
not necessarily advice
No.
that you need. You can end up also overwhelmed with loads of
Yeah.
advice. And
Yeah.
actually, I think what you're saying is that together we were able to create a space, and I was able to hold a space
Yeah.
for you
Mhm.
to really stop and
And pause.
pause.
Yeah. Whereas I didn't think pausing was even an option at the time, because it was just from one day to another, fighting fire, and then straight into the next day. Whereas for you to just almost give me that, let's stop, let's pause, let's understand where you are, and then we craft a plan moving forward, that in itself was just an incredible breakthrough.
Part of my process is helping people to identify long-standing blocks and patterns that often come from their childhood, that that oftentimes we're not even conscious are things that we're doing, because that's just how we see the world. It's how we've embedded our own beliefs and assumptions and values and patterns, right? And that's how it plays out in our life. And so I'm curious about what you saw for yourself through this retreat that was important.
Struggled with communication. I've been able to communicate, but then what I realized on the retreat, there was this part of communication that I've found difficult, and that is communicating my needs and communicating boundaries. Because I've always been one for talking and chatting and be able to do that very well and very confident. And I didn't quite realize that there was this small element, which the one part that I really struggled with was that it was that vulnerability around communicating needs, and especially when it comes to emotions, and to pinpoint it, because it's important and it's something that I've always struggled with and didn't really realize it until then. And what I found was that when things would become difficult, so for me to have to communicate what I needed from a business or a situation, I would hold back and then avoid it. And then it would
build and build and build until it got to a situation where it had
it
to be
blows
dealt
up
with, but was dealt with as
badly.
a big
Yeah.
blow up rather than
Yeah.
something that was.
Whereas it's just a simple communication skill. And
Yeah.
just for me to feel confident enough within myself to
Yeah.
communicate that.
Yeah. And of course, if we've grown up in a family situation where maybe it wasn't acceptable
Yeah.
to express one's needs,
Mhm.
then we get used to not doing that. And actually, you're very lovely.
Yeah.
You want to please people.
Yeah.
You want them to like you, as many of us do. So we spend our time kind of hedging around things, and actually, it can end up getting in the way.
There's not too many people within my family who are great communicators, but that's the way that it is within the family. And then to carry that into business and then new businesses, I was just very much aware, okay, I need to work on this. And it was learning how to do that and how to do it well.
I think you've really expressed that beautifully, that, when we become conscious of the patterns that are holding us back, that's half of the thing. Actually, a lot of change happens in that moment, but actually we then have operated our whole lives out of certain patterns. And so we have skills and strategies for handling life in that way. But, when you realize that you need to become more fully expressed or able to have more difficult conversations with people, then actually you have to learn the strategies for doing that, because you haven't practiced them. And so I guess that's one of the things that we were able to spend some time looking at on the retreat, was how to have those difficult conversations that
Thank goodness.
that a lot of us shy away from. So look, the other really meaningful moment for me on the retreat was, so if I say a little bit more perhaps about how I operate. So I like to use conscious coaching techniques, but also working with the unconscious. And so, one of the things that we experimented with was doing some meditations, and we did a meditation which was we'll call a future self meditation, where we get a chance to kind of go into the future and actually see the fully expanded version of you. The fully expanded, the highest version of Abbie Ryan, and go and have a conversation with her. And let me hand over to you actually to take it from there. Tell us about that experience.
Look, this was part of the retreat that I really loved and really enjoyed, because leading up to the retreat, after a number of conversations, you were very much aware how important my daily rituals are to me, how spiritual I am. I mean, the things that are important to me, not only in my personal life, but in my business life. Therefore, for you to weave those into the retreat, to bring in those elements of meditation and spirituality, it made such a difference, because that's how I want to be able to do business. For me to do business in a way that sits right with me and that feels in alignment, it was equally as important for me to bring in tools that would align with that. And that was just such a powerful part of the retreat. And as you mentioned, it was on a full moon. We walked into the desert, into the dunes, and from that moment of leaving the hotel and its surroundings, and then just being guided by the moonlight into the sand dunes, and we were there, we were discussing, and from that moment all the way through that process, it was just so magical. Again, shoes off, grounding in the dunes, and the way that you crafted that experience, leading into the dune, asking me those questions of, who I have become over the past few years, and where I see myself going. It almost kind of allowed me to look at myself from outside of my body and think, okay, well, I know that I need to get here, and I've already come a long way. And what I liked is that you allowed me to be grateful towards myself, to be quite...
Abbie version 1 has worked very, very hard to get you where you are today. So
and I think I'm quite strict with myself, in a sense of I see things that I need to improve and things that can be tweaked and helped. Whereas I think sometimes I forget to stop and think, no, I've done a great job.
You've done a great job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you to me.
Yeah. And it allowed me that process of being grateful towards myself. You've done a fantastic job to get here.
Whilst also recognizing that it's time for the line in the sand,
Yes.
and that's where we come back to the what got you here won't get you there, that there are
Yeah.
certain patterns and things that you're wanting to leave behind. And actually we were able to go into the desert, onto a sand dune, and actually leave behind some of those things whilst thanking Abbie version 1, profoundly from our hearts for everything that she's done, but recognizing that it's time to let that go, leave those things behind, and then craft the future that you're stepping into. So what is the Abbie version 2.0? And so tell us about a few of the things that you embodied for yourself in terms of becoming Abbie 2.0.
For me, it was still allowing myself to be very feminine and soft in my approach, but yet to still be able to communicate my needs, have boundaries, because I think in the past I've seen that having boundaries was connected to a negative thing. Whereas after, our discussion that day, actually it's not a bad thing. So to be able to still be soft and gentle and creative within my nature, but yet to still have this element of, no, that's not how I like to do things. And when to be able to articulate it, but articulate it really softly, that for me was a game changer, because I'd always connected those being strict, being firm, not having, having strict boundaries with tough people.
Yeah.
And for me to be able to do both of those things, it was a real game changer. So that was something that I really wanted to invite Abbie 2.0. What else did we have?
Yeah, I mean, that absolutely beautifully expressed, and what I saw in you that night was that you got in touch with the full power of your true essence, and you realized that you are unshakable at your core, right? Absolutely unshakable at your core, and it doesn't matter what's going on around or who's doing what. When you come back to that solidity of your central self, of that knowing of who you are, then anything is possible. And actually you can, all of that you can do in a graceful, feminine, elegant way, because it's completely aligned and yet unwavering.
Yeah. To have a light shone on that actually, to be solid within yourself, regardless of the madness that's going around, whether it's personal, whether it's business, and to operate from there. It was an eye-opener. Previously, when things have got tough, I've felt that I've had to flex into maybe a character of myself where we're not actually, just like you said, operating from something that's like a linchpin and the core of myself.
It's a very powerful place to stand. When
it
you
is.
stand in complete alignment with your inner self and with your highest self, that's an amazing place to come from, right? And from there, everything flows. So tell us about what's flowed out of the retreat for you. What were some of the goals that you set? What were some of the outcomes that you've had?
One of the biggest outcomes, I was very much aware that throughout of my business life, that I had attracted individuals that were quite...
You can say it.
I can? Okay.
we know. Narcissistic. I think we're talking about.
Okay, good. I just wanted to check before. I wanted the nod from you before we continued. Quite toxic and narcissistic in their behaviors. And I was aware that I was attracting the same character, but presented in a different body for a number of years. And these characters were getting worse. The more that I was achieving, the tougher that these characters were becoming. And I was fully aware that it was, and just by not understanding how important it is to communicate and to set boundaries and barriers and, to really protect myself and my creativity, this was going to get worse and worse and worse until I did something about it. Therefore, to work with you on this in the retreat and then be given the ultimate chance to put it into practice within about 48 hours of the retreat.
So there's no coincidence in this, and one of the things that we know doing this kind of inner work is that when we shift on the inside, the energy of that translates into the world, and the world shifts around us, and sometimes in quite dramatic ways.
during the retreat, we had mapped out, I believe, where I saw myself and all of my businesses going over the next 5 years.
Mhm.
In my current situation within the retreat, I had a business partner that was very toxic, that was very manipulative, had been in my life and within my working sphere for a good 5, 6 years. And I believe that we met when I was a different version of myself. And I think he struggled to adapt to how fast that I was growing and evolving over the years, and would always try to hold me back with these narcissistic qualities and to really, just to give me a tough time. And as I was evolving and breaking out of this shell, it was just not something that he wanted to have happen.
Right.
And I was aware that after we'd done this planning, he wasn't anywhere in those plans over the next 5 years. And this was something that kind of, it just jumped out at
I
us,
guess
right?
it's one of the surprises, right?
Yeah, we were
That
like, wow,
just
actually,
not there in terms of my ideal future
no.
life and work. Yeah.
Yeah, so we had decided, okay, over the next, few months, that this was going to be a big piece of the work, was to remove myself from him.
Mm.
And we knew it was going to be difficult. We, I think, gave it a timeline of 2 months?
Yep. And we'd also practiced some of the boundary setting conversations that you were going to have around that, right?
Yeah, because I knew that setting new boundaries,
Mm.
it was not going to be pretty with him. And it was going to be like pulling a pin out of a grenade.
Mm.
And we were ready for this.
Mhm.
And we'd worked on the conversations that I needed, how I was going to protect myself.
Mhm.
He must have felt that energetic shift because within 48 hours of leaving the retreat, so this is substantially less time than we'd planned, he'd blown up and given me the perfect opportunity to do it.
I was really proud watching you handle this situation because you were so ready for it. You were coming from that place that we'd identified, which was unwavering in your solidity. And that was how you dealt with it. And so you kind of went back, you responded very calmly and with your boundaries and what you wanted and requested out of the situation. And actually that then brought about the response that it brought about, which clarified things.
Yeah. And we knew it was going to be ugly. It's the way that he operates. And we knew this. This is why it was such an important part of the retreat, was to work out how I was going to deal with it when it erupted. And it did. And thank goodness that we had those 2 days together to prepare me for it, because, again, I just felt unwavering. I knew it was going to get ugly. I knew he was going to act from a real hideous place. And it just allowed me to let him do his thing and to not react.
This all sounds quite negative, though. So tell us about how that's played out. Has it been a negative thing in your life? So how's that played out?
Staying true to myself and my values and knowing my worth and allowing him to remove himself. The most incredible opportunities have come. Well, we set an intention at the middle of the second day, where in my ideal world, who is the client that I wanted to work with? And what would be the ideal opportunity? Now, we thought at the time of me working with this incredible global company and having a project in the form of create concepts, restaurant concepts, high-end restaurants, luxury restaurants. Therefore, for me, what I would have loved to have done is to create another restaurant for this company in mind, and to do that after removing this character. And not only did that opportunity actually come in, so the client in question, do you remember, she WhatsApped me as we were loading up the cars.
You said, I don't believe this. I've just got a WhatsApp from the client that was top of my wish list.
Yeah. So she'd WhatsApp, hey, we need to chat. And from that moment, I knew that something beautiful was coming. So not only did I then manage to remove the dead wood, allow in the new energy, it's not only that restaurant that I wanted to create, but it is actually being essentially their full creative arm in all of the restaurants, all of the projects that they carry out, not only here in the UAE, but globally too. There is no way that I would have been even able to dream up a role like that or an opportunity like that. I was thinking so small. I could create another restaurant for them. No. How about you create all of our restaurants
globally?
Yeah.
I am so proud of you.
No,
Can
you're
I just
good.
say that I am
You are
so
good.
proud of you, and you're so good at what you do. So you're going to smash this out of the park.
Thanks.
And the only thing that was standing between you and this kind of global
Yes.
success was you. You know, the bits
Yeah,
of you that were still kind of hanging on to the place that you'd come from, rather than the place that you needed to expand into to become the fully evolved person who's able to handle all of this with confidence and with grace and with absolute assurance.
But you're right. The thing that was holding me back was my imposter syndrome, questioning my worth. But then that really came from being around those negative characters who really wanted to play me down because they were benefiting from me not having boundaries. So for them to be tapping into my genius, passing it off as their own, and then giving me a whole load of negative talk in the meantime to make sure that I was staying small and not seeing my full potential, then look at what's come in. And I'm so excited because I know I'm going to smash it out of the park. I know I can do it with my eyes closed, but then to also have you and your incredible ways around me to be like, right, you're ready for it. This is exactly what you've needed. You know, you were ready for this before the retreat.
I like to think that I'm a cheerleader who helps, helps to empower you to step into your full power, but not, you don't need me to be there all the time. There are kind of critical moments when you're doing this, going through this upgrade process, when you need somebody else external to help you be that catalyst to change, to really make that change from the person that you've been being, that you're used to being, to kind of think about, okay, what is the big breakthrough that I need here? I'm being called, the world is calling me to upgrade. And that's a tough thing to do on our own. And that's why you thankfully, from my point of view, asked me to come and support you in this process, which I've been delighted to do. And I have to say, look, I know that this kind of transformation work is amazing in terms of the results that are possible, because I've done transformation work for 20 years with people, so I know what's possible. I have to say, this one really blew me out of the water as well, because what you've been able to achieve in the last kind of 6 weeks, 2 months, couple of months since we were on retreat together, is just it just tells me that you were so ready to make that shift to Abbie 2.0, that it was kind of all there, and now you've made that change. It's just the world has aligned to support you in making that a reality, because the gift that you bring to the world is so great.
I knew it would move fast, but I didn't quite realize it would move within 48 hours of leaving the damn retreat and then just also seep into every other part of my life. Because then not only did it set me up within those new businesses, but then there's been things on a personal level that have come in. And the ability to use those new ways of being, because they're not just tools. It was kind of me stepping into, right, this is how I do things now. Really leaving the old me behind. And even during difficult times of the last months or two, thinking, well, how operating from the old Abbie, that's only going to get you so far. So even on days, where it's been difficult and I've had a little wobbly, it's like, no, like we don't operate like this anymore. We don't do this anymore.
And the time that I knew that you'd completely embedded the change was in that conversation when I was asking you to do something with or for me, and you said, do you know what? Actually, that date doesn't work. I'd like to leave it a couple of weeks and come back to it here,
which I would never have done.
And I was just like,
you were so shocked. I was shocked. Where did that come from?
Do you realize you've just set a boundary with me? And you did it completely without blinking. It was just a normal, natural thing to do. Of course, well, it is a normal, natural thing to do, to express one's needs and say, no, this doesn't work for me. Would it be okay if we did it then? But no drama, just, just that's how it is.
I just saw it from a new perspective. It's like, okay, we've had the most incredible experience doing the retreat. Kate has asked me to do something. Actually, I want to do it to the best of my ability. And on that day she's asked me to do, I won't be able to do that. So let me propose a new date.
Well, the old way was to agree to everything.
Yeah.
And then end up having to disappoint people on the day because you actually couldn't fit in everything you'd agreed to.
And it was never that I would not follow through on things. I would just always say yes to so many things.
And it all came from a lovely place. And that lovely place is still there. And, you're still super nice with people. And, that's the experience that they have with you. And at the same time, you're able to say, hey, this would work better. So,
Because I think for me, it was always the saying no that I was that I would find difficult.
What I loved most about it was the fact that you did it and hadn't even realized you'd done it until we stopped and said, "Did you realize
Yeah,
what
we
you
both
just did there?" You're like,
how good. But it was so empowering
yeah.
because
Oh,
it
look
can
at
be
us.
that easy and it can be that enjoyable. Yeah,
Exactly. So life should be easy, and
it
life is
should.
easy when we're kind
Yeah.
of in alignment with
Mm,
ourselves, right?
mhm,
We're not battling it, we're not fighting it. We're just kind of we are
mm,
being ourselves fully expressed,
yeah,
which makes life a lot easier.
it really does.
Yeah.
So thanks. I think the most powerful thing for me has been going to the retreat with what I thought was the purpose of the retreat. I'm heading to burnout. I've started so many companies this year. I'm really pushing myself. There was
Mm.
so much below that I needed to work on. But at the time, I thought we were kind of, looking back at it, it was just would have been sticking a plaster.
I love that, and that's what's so beautiful about this work is that you come with this a challenge or a trigger, or there's
Yeah, yeah,
something that's not working in your life, and that's really the entry point, and we
yeah.
thank those things very much, because actually when we dive into them, when we look at them, they take us right to the heart of the challenge. And
Mm,
this is why it's a transformational retreat, not
mm,
not just a strategy workshop, right?
yeah.
Because actually what we're doing then is going deep, looking at the stuff that
Mm,
is below the surface,
mm,
to say, what do I need to align here? What do I need to shift here
mm,
to put me, an iceberg is a very powerful thing, right? To make sure that I am solid and
yeah.
powerful, and that actually, everything is lined up together. So we're not just
Mhm,
kind of working on the tiny little
yeah.
bit.
And what I loved about it, this is a flaw that I have, or this is a negative trait that I have, whereas you just made it feel like a beautiful part of a process.
That's such a lovely reframe. Thank you for that.
Mm.
Actually welcoming in
Yeah,
our flaws
yeah,
as
yeah.
gateways to kind of greater levels of understanding, and, a part
Mhm.
of our inner journey. So, yeah, we welcome.
But no, you're right, because I think a lot of people give themselves a tough time
Mm.
thinking that things that they're not so great at are things that hold them back. And yes, there's a little element of that. But then actually, I think there's this saying that the transformation that you're looking for is in the work that you're avoiding. And could that not be any truer? Because all of these things that I've been avoiding, thinking that they're flaws, and actually no, they're just part of my character.
Exactly.
And if you can learn to work with them and then to use them to actually to help and to use them to your advantage, it is so rewarding.
And so embracing
Yeah,
those
yeah,
kind of those less than perfect
yeah,
aspects of ourselves, those shadow sides,
yeah.
that if we try and kind of keep hidden, everybody's kind of got their mask on to
Mm,
the world, putting their best face forward, but
yeah,
actually embracing some of those parts of ourselves that we prefer to keep hidden
yeah,
makes us whole.
yeah.
And when we're whole, we are strong and we are grounded and we are absolutely unwavering in our ability to deal with whatever happens in the
Mm,
world. And we're also become very powerful in manifesting the stuff that we
yeah,
want to happen in the
yeah.
world, because our own vibration is aligned.
A lot of people may think, oh, well, I'm succeeding, so I don't need a coach. But then if you look at some of the world's best athletes, they all have a coach. They don't get to where they are by doing things alone. Yeah.
But I love that reframe, which is that even the most successful people in the world actually sometimes need somebody who has that outside
Mm,
perspective that can help them
yeah.
shift.
I guess you could compare this to almost kind of a PT. So to put it into comparison like that, but a PT is not there to kind of to get you up out of bed, to give you motivation. No, it's to give you these techniques and these tweaks of you do this differently, actually
Mm.
do it this way. And that's exactly how I felt on the retreat. It was just to give me these new tools. It
Mm.
wasn't to motivate me. I have the motivation already.
Just picking up on what you're
Mm.
saying there, which I think is really lovely, is, the idea that we're all on a journey of development,
Yes.
but there's never a moment in time when you're done,
No, never.
right? And if you are, you've probably stopped growing,
Yeah.
and you've probably started getting more and more fixed in your ways
Mm.
of being in the world, which we know is not a great thing, right? I mean,
Mm.
for me, life is a continuing opportunity to evolve and grow, and it will be until my very last
Mm.
breath on this earth.
But that's what I love about you. There's always something that you are bringing to me in my life. You're always so inquisitive and curious.
But also, I think life presents us with the curriculum for growth that we need. So, at any moment in time, there's new stuff showing up in your life, which means that there's a new opportunity to identify, where
Yeah.
am I triggered, or where could I contribute more? Where could I serve better? Where
Mm.
could I evolve into the highest, sense of myself?
Mm.
And I think, if we approach life with those questions, then it's it's a fun exploration, not a, not necessarily a crisis point, but more of a sort of,
Yeah, like a curious mindset.
like, how amazing could I make this life? How incredibly expanded could I be? What is my highest potential? I
Mm,
love those kinds of questions, just to say there's just so much more that we are all capable of than we even consider most of the time. And you think about what you're doing, what you're doing now, and your beautiful description of that new client where you're kind of creating globally for
yeah.
them. And 2 months ago, you didn't really have a sense that was the level at which you were able to play,
No.
and yet you are. And so, I think all of us have this. We just have so much more potential that we could dream into, and we play small a lot
Yeah.
of the time. And so, coming to have to do a process like this, I'm delighted that it's allowed you to kind of really
Thank
grow
you.
into the most magnificent version of yourself that you're capable of. And I look forward to partnering you on that growth over time, because I know that there's still more.
Yeah, I just hope this is something that we can do very regular. Not only the retreat, I'd love to do that a number of times within the year, but then to have this touch base
I'm
to
a
cheer me along.
stand for the
Yeah.
highest version of
Yes.
yourself, and
Yeah.
I will
And
do that.
a reminder.
I will be that stand, and I will be that stand with loving care,
Mm.
but also with what I call the loving boot, which
Oh yeah, there was a boot for sure. A caring boot.
the loving boot. I call it the loving boot
Yeah.
because it's like sometimes you need that push from somebody who says, "Come on,
Yeah.
you
And
can do
especially when
this."
you're having a wobbly. And it happens, we all have them, regardless of what's going on in our day-to-day lives. It will come. And then you are just that beautiful reminder of this way. Move. Please.
This is who you really are.
Yeah. But I think we
Yeah.
can kind of forget that.
It's not easy. It's not an easy task to stand in your highest self every single day.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I really thank you for your generosity in sharing
Thank you.
your experience.
I appreciate it so much.
I'm delighted that you've been able to do that, and also, I hope that this will inspire other people to come on a journey of transformation, because beautiful things are possible.
I wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you. It really has not only changed my working environment, but my whole life. That thing.
It is my pleasure. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Thank you so much.